An intellectual carrot. The mind boggles.
You see? You see? You're stupid minds. Stupid! Stupid!
Earth has had Santa Claus long enough. We will bring him to Mars.
I've been afraid a lot of times in my life. But I didn't know the real meaning of fear until I had kissed Becky.
One thing will be clear. It's not for man to interfere in the ways of God.
It's alive. Oh, it's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Earth vs. Soup, episode 165. I'm Aaron Pollier.
I'm Darlene.
And we have a guest again with us because we're talking about a specific movie. Go ahead.
Hey, I'm Chuck Wilson, and we're talking about Godzilla Raids Again, the 1955 classic, the second Godzilla movie.
Yes, we are. And it is likely Darlene's favorite and least favorite movie at this point because it has Anguirus as the guest villain monster, and she loves Anguirus, right?
Yes, I do.
But you didn't. You were annoyed with the movie overall.
It aired in April 24th in Japan.
In 1955.
In 1955, but when it was English dubbed in the United States, it was released in June 2nd, 1959 as Gigantus, the Fire Monster.
The fire monster. Does Anguirus ever have anything to do with fire in this, really?
Well, he does get kind of burned up at the end.
Yeah, he gets burned up in the end. That's actually a really good fight.
Giganticus.
Well, that's supposed to be Godzilla. Gigantus.
Yes.
Anyway. What are your memories of this film? I assume that you've seen it before.
Mine?
Yes, Darlene.
I love the kid's book of dinosaurs that the guy talks about.
But I mean, when did you first watch this? Do you remember ever first seeing it? See, I do.
No, I don't.
Or at least I have early memories of it. But I'll go with Chuck first before me.
Yeah. This was I saw this way back in the 70s. So I have fond memories, but vague memories. This was one of those things that they showed during the God, I forget the channel. It was out of Bay City or Saginaw, but it was there was Creature Feature Week, and every year that they would do a series of Godzilla movies.
Mm-hmm. Okay. See, now as a kid, I remember watching all the Godzilla films that were out, at least at the time, just whenever they were on, and Dad would have them on. And this film was the one that tended to stick out to me later on because I always thought it was a part of the first movie. I always thought that it was the second half of the first movie because it was also in black and white and there were no other black and white Godzilla movies. Everything else was in color. So I always remember thinking that you have to watch Godzilla and this at the same time for whatever reason. Obviously, I kind of came to a different conclusion later on when I actually got a clue. But yeah, this is the last Godzilla movie that's in black and white. And I'm not sure if it's a disservice to it or not. Because in the first movie, I think that the black and white actually adds to the grimness of the movie in a very positive way. I think it really helps. In this, since the tone is lighter, the black and white tends to not be as appropriate in my mind at least. So any other thoughts before we start, Chuck? Do you have anything?
No, nothing I can think of. This being the second Godzilla movie, released a year after the first, the production budget was a fraction. Toho obviously wanted to capitalize on the success of the first movie, but Tsuburaya and the director and they were given a fraction of the budget, and this whole movie was according to the Tsuburaya book, this movie was rushed into production.
Okay.
So,
All
So
right.
it's if you're like, if we go in expecting, the epic that was, Godzilla, it's like, well, there are some elements in there, especially because this is like one of their first kaiju versus kaiju films. But on the other hand, it kind of lacks some of the majesty that the first Godzilla had.
Yeah, and there's a couple scenes that got screwed up and filmed at an improper frame rate, if I remember reading somewhere, but they still ended up using them for it because they just didn't have the money to go back and refilm it.
Yeah, when we talked about this before we started recording. According to the Subaraya book, there's like a sequence where Osaka Castle is destroyed, so that that miniature gets destroyed, but the timing was off when they filmed
Mhm.
it, so they had to spend 2 weeks and a large portion of the budget rebuilding the Osaka Castle miniature just for doing the during just to do the reshoot of that particular sequence.
Mhm, mhm. And oh boy, what else? I think there's other things in this that I read about behind the scenes that kind of blow me away about it, but we'll get to I'll talk about that when we get to the scene, and I bet you, Chuck, you know some of these behind the scenes things.
Oh, about
But
the Nakajima injuries.
well, you can talk about the injuries. I wasn't even talking about the injuries. I was talking about like some of the stunt work that actually happens in this for the monster actors. I guess I can talk about them right now. There's a point where the monsters throw themselves off a cliff and into the water, and the actors are actually in the suits. Those aren't empty suits, and since those suits don't really float very well, they had to have a whole bunch of people like right nearby to drag them out. But like they went down and went down fast. And there's a oh, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I was just thinking, or at this time, I mean, the suits were a little lighter, but they were rebuilt with like liquid latex and other synthetic plastics, so that they were, the Subaraya book says that they were more pliable and lighter. But
Mm-hmm.
still, a gigantic rubber monster suit that you're in is still a gigantic rubber monster suit. It ain't gonna
Yep.
float.
And then there's a scene where later on, this again kind of baffles me, where their Godzilla is being buried by ice, and that's like the suit actor really in a suit in some of the shots. Like obviously it's like a hand model in others, but where you can tell it's the suit actor in the full scale suit, they're literally dumping giant chunks of ice down on him, and I just that wouldn't happen today.
Well, they actually reference this in the Subaraya book. Nakajima states, quote, "I had to stand in the middle of the set while a huge amount of crushed ice came tumbling down on me."
Yeah.
Um, but unfortunately, during the sequence, it states that the platform gave away under the extra weight, and it took Nakajima and cable operator Aizo Kaimai are down with it. So, there were some
Wow.
bumps and bruises apparently, but neither one was like seriously injured.
Still, that's pretty crazy. I mean, for crazy stunts, that's not that big of a deal, but still, in these movies, it just seems like they didn't really plan it out. All this extra weight, they didn't really think it all the way through. Um,
Pulling up those people that are soaking wet in those
oh,
costumes.
that's got to be
That
tough.
that had to be hard.
Well, if you remember correctly, all those suits end up pooling sweat, so those guys are soaked anyway, even when they're not underwater.
Yeah, you got to wonder how waterlogged those suits would get.
Yeah.
But
So
you
Granted,
remember
latex and plastic, but still.
yeah,
my skirt when we got in a downpour in New Orleans, how far it was dragging
yeah, you were
behind
dragging.
me.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the plot here. I think there are actually a couple interesting characters in this. Less than the first movie. In the first movie, there's lots of characters that are actually sort of interesting. This has
The two pilots
the two pilots. Yeah,
and the girl.
yeah, that's fair. What her name's like Hadima Yamaji.
I don't know.
Anyway, we start with the movie with a plane flying over water, and it's a Japanese float plane. And I thought those float plane shots were very good model work. Were very good model work because there was like about a half a second where I didn't know if it was a model or if it was a really good live action shot, just for like a split second. So that tells you something. We're introduced to our lead here. His name is Sukoya, and I know I'm mauling that name. And he's played by Hiroshi Kazumi. I know I can pronounce that name properly. And he's scouting for fish because he works for a large scale fishing company. And out of Osaka, is it? I I'm looking at Darlene like she's taken that notes on that. But go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, I believe it was, or I believe it was
It was
Osaka.
Osaka.
But
Mhm. Okay, and the thing is later on in the movie, I think it's a fishing company in big air quotes because some of the air shots that they have of them out actually scouting for their fish look like whales.
I don't know. Some of those tuna can get pretty big.
They were these things were big and kind of moving in a group in a pod group. And I was like, "Oh, Darlene, oh no." But anyway, he guides a fishing boat towards a school of fish that he has found. And doing so, he's kind of flirting with this company dispatcher over the radio, and that's Hidema Yamaji, played by Setsuko Wakayama. God, I
I
hope
don't know
I'm
how
getting
to
that
pronounce
right.
these names.
We watched like a couple documentaries as well on this, so I'm trying after we watch it just so I can try to get names properly spoken. She's like the boss's daughter, and I guess everyone kind of flirts with her. All the pilots flirt with her, and I'm not sure if it's because they actually like her at this point or if she's just the boss's daughter. Does that make
And
sense?
she can be flirted with, and she doesn't mind it, but
I
they know that she's not going to do anything.
Yeah, that's fair. There's another scout that's out there, and that is boy, and I forget his name. Is that Kobayashi?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
Is-
yeah. Minoru Chiaki.
okay, that's Kobayashi, and that's easy to remember because Kobayashi Maru. Got it.
And that was one of the things that I picked up on when we first watched it. You know, the ship that they're scouting for is
Mhm.
the Kokore Maru, and then
Mhm,
one of the pilots is Kobayashi or Koichi
mhm.
Kobayashi. So it's like, you know, this was 1955. You know, Wrath of Khan was in like 1982. You know, was the reference to the Kobayashi Maru in Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, was that just kind of like a little wink and a nod to the to this movie?
No, it's not to this movie. It's actually a wink and a nod to Roddenberry's World War II experience, because a lot of Japanese civilian ships end their name with Maru because it means beloved.
Hmm.
I actually know that bit of trivia. So, like, you would often have like beloved so and so, or the beloved winds of home, something like that. That would be its name. So, Kobayashi Maru is just beloved Kobayashi
Hmm.
as a name of a ship. So, I don't think it's a reference to this movie. Rather, it's more of Roddenberry serving in the Pacific Theater during World War II, and him kind of knowing these things.
Yeah, I figured if anybody would know, you would.
Yeah, yeah. So he this other guy Kobayashi, his engine quits and he calls out a mayday and he puts down near an island. So Tasuka goes to find him and he finds him pretty quick, and it turns out that Godzilla is on this island. They hear his roar and they take cover. Now, we already know this is supposedly in the same continuity as the first film. Godzilla died in the first film. He turned to bones. His bones are later used in Mechagodzilla and all that. But
With an oxygen destroyer.
the oxygen destroyer.
And they bring that into the conversation.
Do they talk
too.
about the oxygen destroyer in this? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, later on
I
in the
have
film.
notes here with Dr. S.
So they kind of get a immediate monster fight because you have this new Godzilla that's on this island, and Anguirus shows up, and they grapple. They fall into the water. Okay, so we go back to um, Osaka City Police headquarters, where these two pilots are basically being walked through a dinosaur book to figure out what Anguirus is.
Yes, that wonderful dinosaur book that I think is in all three of these. You know, the one before.
Yeah, they had it. They had it in the first film. It's here in this film.
And then and it was in the other one too.
Yeah. It's in the third Godzilla film.
And it's a children's. It's in English too.
It's
This
an
time you
English
get to
dinosaur
see
book,
that
yeah.
it's actually in English.
And I guess you can still find copies of that around. So if you ever want to get like an extremely out of date and unscientific now, at least, dinosaur book, you can find the one that they try to describe Godzilla and Anguirus out of. But they basically say that he's like a cross between an ankylosaurus and a stegosaurus because he has spikes and like big spikes.
Yes, and it was a Stegosaurus too.
But they also said that like Godzilla was a cross between some sort of like pteranodon and
like Tyrannosaurus, or
yeah, like a Tyrannosaurus and a Stegosaurus as well because of his spines. Now, mind you, they don't explain why he has atomic breath and all that.
No.
But I mean,
well,
it's
technically they didn't explain why Kobayashi's plane was having problems. They just used it as a vehicle to get Shoichi and Kobayashi to the island to get the kaiju in there as fast as possible and get some use out of those puppets, or the Godzilla puppet head.
And this is also something that this is a point where a lot of these Godzilla films have this. It's where somebody that is a quote unquote expert just makes information up out of like that's complete nonsense. And everyone just believes it and it turns out to be true. There's like no basis for them to understand this. And this guy says that, hey, look, Anguirus might be really tough because his brain is distributed completely across his thorax and abdomen. How do you know this?
Oh, that was said. There was also the one in the next one.
Yeah, in the third film.
I got to bring up that one.
But, okay, how do you know this? And it just turns out to be true later on. We're shown old footage of Godzilla to demonstrate what he did to Tokyo. And it is a little eerie to me, those scenes, because it's all done silently, obviously because the film is not supposed to have sound. But they're just watching this silent footage of Godzilla wrecking crap. And I thought it was actually effective, because the first film is very effective at this. They mentioned the fact that Godzilla is killed with an oxygen destroyer, and they now, with these two monsters, face a danger greater than nuclear weapons. Okay. Jets fly over the pilot and the lady radio operator as they talk outside the office, and it turns out that these jets have been sent out to search for Godzilla, and they track him as he approaches the shore. The fishing company guy is a jerk at this point to me because he's more worried about the loss of his fishing grounds than the fact that there's this giant monster coming to destroy Japan again. He's like, oh, my fishing grounds. I hate to tell
you, if Godzilla is in the fishing grounds, all those fish are dead.
Well, they shouldn't be eaten because they're going to be toxic. Yeah. So the two lovebirds, Tsukuya, God, I'm never going to be able to pronounce that name. Tsukuya.
He just uses his first name, Yashuichi.
Yashuichi?
Her first name is Shoichi.
Oh, Soichi.
Yeah. Shoichi Tsukuya or Tsukuya.
Soichi. And then Hadini go out to dance. And they're just dancing. And remember, everyone already knows that Godzilla is coming towards the island. So everyone's out dancing and then are shocked to hear that Godzilla is coming right towards the island again. I don't really get that. And it turns out that I guess it's because that he has changed his course directly for where they're dancing. It just so happens. Everyone at this dance hall starts panicking. And the city goes into blackouts, and we see jets flying towards Godzilla. And the city goes into blackout because said scientist has stated that Godzilla is attracted to light. How do you know this? That wasn't the case in the first movie. There's no evidence of that here, but it just turns out he's correct again. The jets pop off flares, and Godzilla is drawn to them like zombies in Land of the Dead. He cannot take his eyes off of them.
But there's the convict group.
Yeah, there is this convict group that is involved in the next scene.
Yes,
and I thought that was interesting.
Well, more odd. It's like, why didn't any of these prisoners have handcuffs on? And only one. There's only one prison guard, and everybody's just sitting there, arms crossed. I mean, no handcuffs, no, not restrained, nothing.
And making obviously motions of communication.
Hey, dude, see that cop? He has his gun completely unholstered and easy to grab in a whole trailer full of, freed prisoners, effectively.
I mean, there was obvious comments. We don't if there was no language spoke there,
Yeah,
but I
like,
got it.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, because by the way, we watched the Criterion Collection version of this, and it has it's all in Japanese with English subs. Uh, so yeah, you could have had the scene on mute and you knew exactly what was going on. It was so blatantly clear. Anyway, you have these prisoners that are being transported. They all take out the guards. They break out of the van, and a lot of them are running away. And it just so happens that the two pilots that are now have left the dance and all that are passing by.
That's because they dropped her off at some out. Wasn't that the house on the hill?
Mm-hmm.
And then he needs to come back and get the boss man.
Something like that.
Yeah.
Honestly, it looked like they dropped her off at a cave.
They dropped her off at Bronson Cave, right, Darlene? It's the magic cave where all the Hollywood films are made. You can just disappear in there and pop out at another movie. Anyway, so everyone ends up giving chase, and I wrote down the criminals are assholes because they can't drive or are unwilling to actually like look where they're going, and they crash into the largest
oil tank
they possibly can, setting fire to it. And it just lights up the city, and Godzilla goes, "Oh, wait.
Wow, look at here.
Look, I'm attracted to light all of a sudden. I think I want to go towards that giant fireball that's cooking off in the distance," right? Yeah. And isn't that where we see an actual really cool map painting where it's Hidemi looking out her window or something like that at was, like the giant fireball?
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to laugh about. Here it is as a blackout. And she's got
her windows wide open, the house lights on.
And the house light on. And it's got some kind of weird thing over top of it. But it's not it's dampening the light.
Yeah, the city's supposed to be in a World War II style blackout. Everyone would be able to see her house up on the hill just lit up. Anyway.
But there was all that beautiful neon beforehand, right after the dancing sequence.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so we have this giant fuel depot lighting up, and then Godzilla approaches, and we actually get some cool model work again. Now, again, all these Godzilla films have like Tamiya models in them that are all motorized, so they move on their own. You can tell they're models. That's fine. I appreciate good model work, especially when it's detailed with tons of these little things running around. And I wrote down that we see some Sherman tanks, and I put Sherman tanks in big air quotes because they've been clearly modified, and Katyusha rocket launchers.
At this point, I said, wow, this would be great to go to a convention and have somebody do this and have it as a show,
Like just everyone out there roaring away with models to just blast somebody that's stomping around a scale model.
Well, I was just like, take this scene and just put it as a show at
and go, how many things are wrong here? Chuck, do you have something?
Yeah, I've heard of this happening. I've never been able to verify it, though.
Okay.
Around the time that the Disney movie Big Hero 6 was released, one of the characters, his super suit was like this fire breathing kaiju outfit, and the story that we were told was that somewhere in San Francisco there's like this underground club, or a group of people who love the old kaiju films, and they build these elaborate model sets and then dress up as kaiju and have wrestling matches in them.
Really?
And it's one of those. I mean, I've done some initial searching on it, but I've never been able to actually track down or track it down. But
okay.
It strikes me as one of those things where if it was if it actually happened, if it was real, you'd see a lot of people like Comic-Con or Gen Con or something, or it's some convention like that, or Dragon Con that would actually pay to bring some people in and do this as like a kind of a spectator thing.
Oh, it would be amazing to watch.
But it's crazy. It seems crazy enough that that it may be true.
Sure.
I've never been able to verify it.
Now, in the first movie, we do see the military opening up on Godzilla with everything they have, right? We see him being attacked with airplanes, with tanks, and all that. I'm not misremembering that, correct? They, yeah, the military's out there doing stuff to them, right? So
Yeah, I believe so.
This is kind of what baffles me in this, that the military thinks that it's going to work this time, and then it's also going to work against the giant armored ankylosaur type creature that has even a thicker shell than Godzilla.
Well, admittedly, they didn't have like the maser cannons and stuff like that. But...
Yeah, that's different. That's when the maser cannons start coming out. That's a different story. I totally. And the third movie, we'll talk about that when we review the third movie, folks. We're going to do that for episode 170. But the third movie, they actually have things that were classified at the time, but made complete sense that the U.S. would have, but not the Japanese. And that was, they had Davy Crockett portable nuclear bombs. But
they didn't go off on that.
Yeah. Anyway, back to this movie. Oh,
chronologically, though, within the context of the Godzilla, or Godzilla universe, did they ever state how much time passed between the death of the first Godzilla and the reappearance of this Godzilla?
It's only a couple years. It's supposed to be like the same amount of time as has passed between the movies. At least that's what it's implied.
I don't get any dating. When I watched, I didn't see any dating.
No.
But then again, they destroy how many of those castles in these first three movies?
Well, didn't Godzilla destroy it in the first one, too?
Did he destroy it in the first one?
I honestly don't recall.
Okay.
But he destroyed it in these last two.
Yeah, in the second and third movies. Anyway, back to this one. So the Anguirus comes ashore. All of the military is opening up on both of them. They are completely ineffectual, like rocket launchers. It's just bouncing off their skin.
Godzilla breathes on Ankylosaurus.
Well, on Anguirus, yeah.
Anguirus. And everything behind him is now on fire.
Everything behind him, but Anguirus is like, so what? Like, what did you expect to do with your atomic breath, buddy? I mean, he's a giant, like, armored, shelled creature, right? I think that's actually kind of cool because everyone that was watching this film at the time, or everyone that's watching this for the first time at least, would go, Godzilla's going to wreck this guy with his atomic breath. But the fact is that Anguirus is one tough bugger, right?
Yep. And everything behind him catches on fire. And then you see the three guys, the three prisoners, run into the subway. And what happens to the building there?
Gets blown up, right?
Comes tearing down, and then it floods.
Yeah, then it floods.
That I didn't understand.
But I think that's from like the monsters actually coming out of the water, and there's like tidal flow from it. I think. But we do see one interesting thing that they don't really touch on later, and that's Anguirus's roar. When Anguirus roars, it actually breaks that castle. It starts shattering the rock.
That's the next thing, is it starts shattering the castle that they're fighting around.
And then Godzilla throws him into it, and it just wrecks the castle. And we get one of the rare times in Godzilla where we see blood from the monsters. That is a rare thing in these movies. And it's when Godzilla bites into the neck of Anguirus. To me, that looks like blood. It's in black and white, so it's a little difficult. But we go to the next morning after the two monsters throw themselves into the water again. The city is wrecked. It should be radioactive from the atomic breath being used and the fact that Godzilla is highly radioactive as it is.
And no sighting of Godzilla by the two pilots.
Yes, and the fishing office is wrecked. So they all kind of go up to the fishing office. And then we go, and this confused me a little bit. Well, I should say that you confused me a little bit. You said it goes from summer to winter, and I said, no, it doesn't. Because they moved to a snowy city, and I said they could just be up in the north of Japan.
Oh, is that what that was? Because I was like, it looked like it went from summer to winter. So I think there is something about a 6 months.
It's possible, but all the maps on the wall show that Northern
Island. Sapporo.
Is it Sapporo? I don't. Again, my lack of knowledge of like Japanese geography fails me here. I should just bring up a map of Japan at some point for these.
So maybe that map was trying to tell us that they moved their headquarters.
Yeah, and this is the scene where we see the pilots going out and scouting for this new the new fishing fleet that's up here, and that's where we see them hunting whales. At least it really looks like whales to me. And later on, there's this scene, and it's weird because it's in the American version that got released. I know it's different than the Criterion Collection version. It's where all the salarymen are in that tea house drinking and singing. And in the American version, it's a completely different song, but I guess it's a fish song.
Oh, I didn't pay attention to that at all.
I don't remember what the song. It's like a traditional fish song, and then I immediately thought of that weird fish song from Girls und Panzers that they're forced to sing, that Uki Uki Uki's fish song. They all seem to be actually having a really, really good time. By the way, I know like Chuck doesn't like it, but we both loved Girls und Panzers. It's cute.
I like the concept. The only thing I didn't like about it, and what kind of ruined the film for me, or the series for me, was that the upperclassmen bullied the young or underclassmen into joining the tank club.
Yeah,
when she clearly didn't want to.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. That is, they do that.
Well, they bullied the narcoleptic
girl
too
into doing it. Yeah.
So,
but yeah, there's a lot of little cute things in that movie. So I'm not big on anime, but that's like one of the few animes that I really, really, really like. And it reminded me, the fish song reminded me of the fish song that's in Girls and Panzers. I know that's just kind of an aside, but they hear about another ship that's disappeared, and they know it's Godzilla because the captain reported it being Godzilla before losing contact.
So, you did see that one, because I was like, what the crap? How do they know it's Godzilla?
Well, that the information initially seems to come out of nowhere. Then we learn later that there was like a last signal from this boat that said, oh my God, it's Godzilla.
Oh.
And Godzilla just, I guess it had lights on the boat and he was attracted to it and he wanted to eat it. I don't know.
Sorry, I might have been writing a note.
Yeah. So the captain reports it, and then Tsuka spots Godzilla moving through the water while he's flying around, and then Godzilla ends up on an icy island. Okay,
yes.
So
is this at this point? Godzilla's already vanquished Argilus, right?
Yeah, yes. he's not around anymore, at least.
And Gareth was last seen upside down with his feet up and blood coming out of his neck.
Yeah, I mean, Godzilla does toss him into the water, so it's left vague what happened, obviously. But, yeah, he's been vanquished, let's say. So, where are we? Okay, so we get into this one big scene. Now that Godzilla's on this icy island, we have a long scene where the military decides to start dropping bombs on Godzilla to trap him by dropping a mountain of ice on top of him.
And calling in a lot of landing ships with 55-gallon drums of gasoline.
Yeah, more environmental disaster stuff.
Ring of Fire was going to stop Godzilla.
Yeah, we were going. This we gotta say them they didn't do.
We're gonna trap Godzilla in this little valley by just lighting off a few 55-gallon drums. Well, it's about 24 55-gallon drums of gasoline. Yeah, that's not gonna do anything to him.
In them, it was suggested by a general or something, and they're like, no, let's not do an environmental.
So you can. You can imagine like those poor Navy trooper like Marines having to land their landing craft. They're going, "Oh my God, I can't believe we've been ordered to do this. I want to have children someday, and I have to get onto the same island as Godzilla." I mean, so there's a whole bunch of planes that get taken out, and Godzilla ends up taking out one of these float planes with his atomic breath, which. I was like, oh my God, I didn't expect that. The guy has to be like just a burnt cinder inside now. No, he's okay. Right? Like he crashes into the mountain, but he's totally okay before that.
I like the jet that got slapped out of the sky by Godzilla.
Godzilla bitch slaps a freaking F-86.
Did you see that, Chuck?
Did you guys see Top Gun Maverick?
No, we haven't seen it yet. No.
Okay. When you see it, you'll understand the obviously unintentional Godzilla Reigns Again reference as they're like going through the how they're setting up. Okay, we need to dive down, then go or then go up, release our bombs
Yeah.
and stuff. There's a scene in Top Gun Maverick where they're doing like a training exercise, and they're doing like almost the exact same thing. He's like flying through a canyon, and then
Mhm.
he has to like dive down to drop a bomb and hit hit a target,
Yeah.
and then zoom up. And I was watching that. It's like, okay.
Godzilla
Another
Rage.
thing, it's like, 99.99% chance this was unintentional, but still, there is. Yeah, you got to wonder sometimes.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So Godzilla decides to stay in the valley because he's suddenly afraid of a few barrels of gasoline
burning.
and they keep dropping bombs on him as he keeps taking out jets. Like I didn't count how many jets he ends up taking out, but it is quite a few.
And then somebody runs into the side of the mountain. And
well, it's the pontoon plane. Remember that?
That was Kobayashi.
Yeah, that's Kobayashi that sacrifices his life. Well,
Yeah.
I guess it's not really a sacrifice. It's more of like unintentional help at that point because it's not like he had control over his plane. He should have been flash blinded by the atomic breath at the very least. But it is meant to come off as like a heroic sacrifice.
Well, my question was, it's like if he was trying to tip off the pilots of the jets to drop their bombs on the side of the cliff so they could bury Godzilla in ice, why didn't he just use his radio?
Yeah, that's true. We know he has a radio. That has been established. So the military ends up dropping a whole bunch of bombs on the side of this mountain. Godzilla and the suit actor inside of him is buried underneath a mountain of ice. And everyone celebrates. We have defeated Godzilla at last. And I chuckled.
Under ice, and that poor guy was standing in there.
I know.
As things of ice come fumbling down onto that poor actor in a suit.
Yeah.
That had already been drowned.
Yeah, that had been thrown into the pool outside of Toho.
Yeah.
I have a story about the Toho pool. And it adds in, it works for this review. It will work for our episode 170 review. But I guess the giant outdoor pool that they film a lot of these water scenes in outside of Toho, it's outside. It has birds' poop in it. But the birds poop live fish eggs sometimes. And there are fish that grow inside this pool, and they have to try to fish all the fish out before they film these scenes, because if you get in with these suits, the fish will sit there and jump out of the water around you or nibble at the suits. So it's insanity.
I could see that news thing. Need people for fishing in a pool.
Well,
you just throw a couple bunch
that's
of production
all your fish you want. Your free fish.
Yeah, I know.
You just take a bunch of production assistants and say, and with nets, and say, go to it.
Yeah, but I mean, I thought that was funny. Like, I can see that ruining shots because you're in there in your Godzilla suit up to your waist, right? And then suddenly a carp jumps out and smacks into the side of the Godzilla suit.
Or gets inside the suit.
Or gets inside the suit. That would be bad, right? Okay.
Like the guy that crashed his truck because he got off scot-free of the accident because he said a mouse went up his pant leg and bit certain parts of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, so what did you do on you working on Godzilla raids again? Oh, that's awesome. What were you? Or were you one of the monsters? No, I was a fish wrangler.
Fish wrangler, just to get it out of the Toho pool. So what worked in this film? Chuck, I'll let you go first.
Even though they got a lot of use out of that Godzilla, Godzilla head hand puppet, I still want to say the latex suits, the latex and plastic suits. I mean, I think that was probably one of the high points of the movie for me, because you can see they're still working on the evolution of what Godzilla is going to become, from a character design perspective. But they hit or Anguirus spot on right from the start.
Yeah, Anguirus looks really good. I do like the Godzilla suit. I wrote down in my notes that one of the puppets was really goofy looking. One of the Godzilla puppets was really goofy.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's when you saw the eyes coming towards you, though.
Well, I think it's where they started popping off flares to draw him away, and they used a puppet for like the camera's supposed to be kind of looking up at him and you see the flares sparkling in the sky. That puppet there was a lot wrong with it. But there's other puppet shots in this movie that are really good. And the suits, the full-size suits, yes, fantastic. I would say that the models in this are fantastic, specifically the pontoon plane right at the beginning. Like I said, for about a half a second, I thought it was a real airplane for about a half a second. Yes, I clearly, afterwards I noticed all the little details. Okay, no, this is a model. But the fact that it was a half a second of me questioning, that's a good model shot. Okay. Even the goofy looking Shermans, I give a lot of respect to the model makers being able to animate all of them, because they put electrical motors in them. That's how they move around and all that. And then all the special effects. Is this the movie? This is where watching a whole bunch of movies kind of gets weird. Is this the one where Godzilla breathes on the Sherman and the Sherman actually like melts and glows in a really good way?
I don't think so.
No, that's probably the next one.
Yeah.
But the fact is that these model workers really do put a lot of effort into their craft, and it shows on screen. Again, from a modern perspective, you can be jaded and say, okay, these are clearly toys. I don't care that they are. You have a guy in a giant rubber suit. Yeah.
That's the charm of these things, is you get to see this, the toys that you would have, you had activate and play out things that you never thought they'd do.
Yeah. I mean, I can look over at my shelf right now and see Tamiya models, right? And I love the fact that I can make a Godzilla scene with my own hands. Yeah, I don't have a Godzilla suit, but I could build a whole bunch of Sherman tanks and put fireworks on them and do almost the same, not quite, but almost the same thing. And there's a lovely charm to it that I love seeing, and it works. Darlene, do you have anything?
I actually think this one had a semi-people plot.
There is a people plot in this.
Yes,
which is normally you like it.
I kind of liked it.
Okay.
Like I said, there was 3 characters that you felt sorry when he augured in.
Yeah.
And usually you're like, okay, that's just another.
Well, so it's a common problem in Godzilla films where you don't really care about the human plot. You just want to see the monsters fighting. And you know what? You pay your ticket price. You want to see Godzilla fight things, right? There's nothing wrong with that.
That's fair.
But there should be a people plot in it that you care about. And I say that because I'll go right back to Mothra, the first Mothra movie. There's the fairies. Are they people in my definition of this? Yes. You care about them. They're not the giant monster fighting. You care about like the guys that found them and are trying to rescue them. You do care about their plot. You also want to see the evil industrial guy fail.
The evil show person.
Yeah, you want to see him fail, and that means that the person plot, not just the giant monster plot, is working. In Godzilla, you see, you have the guy that makes the oxygen store. Why can't I pull his name out of my head? Subaraya, is that his name? No, it's not Subaraya.
You're talking about the director?
No, I was talking about the guy that actually made the oxygen destroyer.
Yeah, that's the one.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Why ever I can't bring these names out of my head, but anyway, like there's people plot in that dealing with like this weird love triangle, and you actually cared a bit about what was going on. In this, it's not as strong. The people plot isn't as strong, but there is a people plot.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just having enough is good.
Yeah, and that guy's name was Dr. Daisuke Serizawa.
Serizawa. That's right.
Yeah.
That's where I have the Dr. S in there.
Yeah, Serizawa. So I think that worked. What else worked? Can we think of anything else that worked? I mean, all the model work. I love the castle being destroyed. Again, it gets destroyed in so many of these movies, but it looks good.
And it got destroyed twice in this movie.
Yeah, I think Subaraya and his crew did a fantastic job with the limited budget that they had.
Yeah, and I think that they did, even though there were problems with the frame rate during one of the monster fights, I don't think it hurt the movie at all. I actually think it worked.
You can see that there was some variation in the or in the footage during the fight sequences.
Yeah. Is there
So,
anything else that really stands out to you, Chuck, that really works in this movie?
well, I don't know. I think it's more of an oddity as opposed to works or doesn't work.
Okay.
If you go back and listen to like the Godzilla movies from the late '70s to the or '80s and '90s, and even today, Godzilla and Anguirus, they both have a rather distinctive roar. But in this one, you'd hear Godzilla roar, but they would also have like a croaking noise with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like they were trying to they just haven't fully decided on the iconic Godzilla. This is what he sounds like, and that's it.
No, you're right. You're right. It isn't the classic Godzilla roar yet. It's close. They're almost dialing it in. I think the next movie they do dial it in, and it becomes that classic. And Anguirus pretty much stays the same through all of his appearances. It's that saxophone. They use it as there's a saxophone that they used as its bass, and I think it sounds fine. It has its own distinct sound. What doesn't work? Darlene, you want to go first on this one?
No,
No,
I don't want to go first.
Chuck, do you want to go?
Yeah, near the end, the end of the movie, Kobayashi is dead, and leading up until that point, he's like they call him, the groom, kind of as a joke, and then we find out the boss's daughter is pulling out his notepad that he supposedly forgot there, and there's a picture of a girl there, and even with the watching it on the Criterion Collection, I couldn't see the photograph well enough to determine was that a photograph of the boss's daughter, or was this actually a photograph of another young lady that he was, or from his school days that he had a crush on, that he was either dating or,
From what my assumption, because I agree with you, it's difficult to see. I thought that was supposed to be the boss's daughter. That she realized that he had been in love with her the entire time, and she and had never done anything about it because his friend Sequoia was dating her.
Yeah. See, and that makes the whole human interest story a lot more interesting and a lot more tragic, and I think it works much better than than him having like a girlfriend in another city kind of story that he'll never see again, and they'll have to try and find her and tell her that he's dead.
Yeah, no, I agree that they should have made it clearer that was the case, because why wouldn't you do that? Like, it doesn't, that last scene where she finds the picture has no dramatic meaning if it's just some random girl.
Right.
Like, she looks upset, right? That's why I assumed it was supposed to be her.
That's what I thought too.
I mean,
but I wasn't sure.
Either way, it works because it's still a tragic ending. But I think that the picture being the boss's daughter just seems to fit a lot more with the tone of the story.
Yeah,
and I think it's supposed to be a picture of younger.
Well, yeah. So one of the things I'll say doesn't work, besides the puppet being goofy in one shot, is that the last scene with the jets attacking the side of the mountain drags on way too long.
Yeah.
I think it probably, while it's great to see like Godzilla, swatting out jets out of the sky and burning out pontoon planes, and you have main characters augering in, the fact is that it seemingly repeats these jet runs over and over and over again, where it's the same sort of result. And they could have cut it maybe a couple minutes out of it total. I would say maybe 2 minutes out of that last scene, and really tightened it up to give it a very strong ending. Here, it just kind of felt like it petered through this last scene. And then you have like the picture being found in the notebook and all that. And you're like, wow, okay. That would be my one thing I say did not work in this movie, is that last scene just dragging.
Yeah, another problem that I had was I mentioned earlier how they sped up some of the footage in some of the sequences with the kaiju battles. when they do that, especially like are on the island, or like when they film at a normal speed, and we'll see this again in the next movie. Um, you lose some of the weight, some of the mass, some of the ponderous, you know, feeling of these monsters. They don't feel as large. They feel like, oh, okay, guy in a rubber suit, as opposed to, wow, a gigantic monster. You know, it's like I've mentioned this before, I'm sure. In the Terry Gilliam film Time Bandits, you've got you know the 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 wrestler who is got the ship on his head, and he's walking through the water and coming up. And I say wrestler because that's the actual, or they actually got a wrestler to do that. This large ponderous guy, and they played tricks with with the footage. When they filmed it, so they could, like, record it at one rate, play it back at another rate, so that it looked slower and it looked like he was an actual giant coming out of the water and marching across the landscape. And it just gives you that epic feel of how huge this guy is. And that's kind of the thing that I expect with a lot of, or with a lot of the Godzilla movies. It's easy to get lost in okay, this is, yeah, it's a model, but I can suspend my disbelief because of, and it's like these are guys in rubber suits, but I can suspend my disbelief because of the tricks that they're playing with the camera that are tricking my brain to give these things a sense of mass and scale that they don't have in real life. And that's where I think they kind of fell down a little bit in some of the kaiju battle sequences here.
Yeah, because they didn't go back and refilm it at that fast frame rate so they could slow it down. Yeah, I think it does do a disservice to the film overall. It makes the monsters look jittery, almost like they're hyper, and because they're moving faster than you expect them to be moving. Right. They shouldn't be moving that fast.
And they actually did that in the in the Avengers movies. If you look at with Ant-Man, when he embiggens himself, now he's moving slower and more ponderous, and it gives you that sense of scale. That sense of an epic, or height and size and mass.
So do we have any final, like, works or doesn't work that we want to throw out there before we give our final thoughts on the movie, whether we recommend it or...
Well, something that did work, I thought, and again, I'm going back to giving credit to Mr. Smeagol from Reddit. Godzilla Raids Again was 9 minutes and 30 seconds of... are out of 92 minutes. So we're looking at about 10% of the film was kaiju battles, as opposed to, the original Godzilla, which was, about 9.1% of the film, being, 8 minutes, 45 seconds out of 96 minutes.
So it's a little more. It's a little more fighting.
Yep, they're giving us a little bit more,
And, but like I said, that there's enough going on with the human plot that the non-monster stuff doesn't really drag that badly.
No, it does hold your interest,
Yeah.
I think it could have used, some serious editing. He could probably crop it down by about 5 minutes, and then throw in another 5 minutes of kaiju battles.
Yeah, because Anguirus, while he gets bit in the neck and thrown into the water, you do sort of expect him to be back at least one more time. There could have been like a rematch somewhere, like on that ice island, and they both get buried. I don't know. It could have worked that way. Like, they were too busy fighting each other to really fight the humans that were trying to bury them in ice or something like that. That could have been done.
Yeah, and I can't get down on them too badly. I mean, this is like only the second kaiju film that they did, and they would have like another 7 before they came up with Godzilla versus King Kong. So they're like 7 kaiju films before they came up with another Godzilla movie. So again, I can forgive any of the little quibbles that I have with Godzilla Raids Again, because brand new genre, second film in that genre, that Toho has done, and they're still finding their way and doing a superb job with with the budgets that they had.
Yes. And like I said, it feels more connected to the first film than later films, in my mind, because they're both black and white. They both have a bit of a grittier feel to them because of it. It's still Godzilla being like that dark film that it was.
Well, here's a question for you too.
Mhm.
If this was actually filmed in color, or if they went back and colorized it, do you think it would work just as well?
No.
No, yeah, no, I don't think so. Some of this movie works really well because it's like dark and stark.
And it's black and white, and yeah.
It works a little better to me as black and white because I can imagine some of these scenes in color, like where she's looking out over the bay to see the giant fireball raising in the background from the oil fuel tanks. I can imagine that easily in color, and that would sure be glorious. But the kaiju fight in this, I like it in black and white.
The only thing that I would have made it color to be a start thing is that picture that she of the girl.
Sure, but that's such a minor bit to it.
Yeah, but that would have hit a.
See, one of the things
If I was to go back and colorize something,
So you're
I
saying
would've-
kind of like doing a Schindler's List with the or the girl in the colored, or the little girl in the colored coat being the only color in that whole movie. You're saying doing a similar thing with Godzilla Raids Again, where when she pulls out the young girl's picture from Kobayashi's notebook,
Mhm.
and that being in color.
Yes, that's what I think.
Or the fireball rising out. I mean, like the things that are like shocking, the things that should be shocking. Because I will say one of the reasons why movies made about World War II airplanes, like let's say, hey, any of those Pacific theater films that are talking about some of these air battles, the reason why they hold up so well is not just because they're using the actual planes still to film it, it's that they're in black and white, and that holds up a little better because you have go out into an airplane. It's fairly monochromatic. Yes, it's more like blue and white, but it's still fairly monochromatic when you're up in the sky in the middle of the ocean. It gives that same sense of disconnect from the normal world. It's one of the reasons why I say I don't like going to see 3D movies because I see 3D all the time in my real life. I want to have a disconnect from that and have entertainment in a different way. And I think black and white for this works well. That being said, I don't think the later Godzilla films would work well with black and white, but that's because of the tone of the movie changes. That these two first movies were serious. It gets a little less serious later on. And that's where you want to have that kind of colorful um, Batman TV show style, lighting, color, bright colors, that kind of stuff. So I will recommend this film. I think it's good. It's not as good as the first one. It's not as good as Godzilla, but it's still good. There's a lot of things going for it. Chuck, what do you think?
Well, you make an interesting point about the use of or black and white versus the later color films. I'm back teaching animation history for the fall semester, or this month, and this semester, and the first couple classes I've shown a lot of the old black and white films and some of the cartoons, some of the early stop motion animations, as well as like the Malay films like Georges Méliès, and the Lumiere brothers from like back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, going up to the 1910, 1917s, before the advent of sound. And all these films, if they're not color tinted after the fact, they're all black and white. And I'm showing some of them black and white. I'm showing pretty much all of them black and white as I can find them. But the majority of them don't have sound. So some of them I'm playing these films without sound, and the students are having this interesting disconnect. Some of them are like, okay, this is black and white, and there's no sound. I can't deal with this. And others are like, okay, there's no sound. This is really interesting because I can, even though there's no intertitles, I can still follow the plot, like Millet's A Trip to the Moon. I'm showing that with no sound, and obviously the film was created with no intertitles. So some of the students are like, the poses, the action, the body language, it's very, what I'm seeing on the screen is very readable, very understandable. And it's like, now I want them to look at the Smashing Pumpkins video Tonight, which draws heavily from the films of Millet. and it's all in color, and it's sort of like, I'm just wondering, those students who are having trouble with a black and white film that has no sound and no color, and those who can really get into it and now here's something in the same vein that has color and sound. So and see if there's like a dichotomy there between what they can actually accept from these older films, or they can accept or can't accept it because it's an older film as opposed to a newer one. And that's where I think that we're at with when we're making the jump to the next movie, the next Godzilla film, because Godzilla and Godzilla Raids Again were the only two filmed in black and white, as you said. And so now we're going to make the jump to color, and we're also going to see a change in the tone of story. So I think, just how they were filmed, the story, the like I said, they're the color combination. I'm sorry, the black and white, the lighting has great effect on the tone of the film and a lot of the different sequences, and it makes both of these movies instant classics in my mind. So
no, I agree.
I would put both of them on any kaiju fans must watch list.
Yes.
I've got to say this, since you talked about people can get the thing from the
I know exactly what you're going to start talking about.
Actors.
Yeah.
Actors.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
We have noticed that the actors in the 30s that were silent actors before, they can emote more facial stuff in that.
Very, very subtle stuff that instantly communicates tons of lines of dialogue. And the reason I say this, and I'm going to bring it up, is we talked about this extensively in our review of Dracula, the first Dracula with Bela Lugosi. And it's because Bela Lugosi, we can chuckle about his later in life garbage movies that he was in.
We also have Karloff.
Boris Karloff's in the same vein as this, and Lon Chaney Jr.
Sorry, I'm just having flashbacks from Ed Wood.
Oh, I know. Ed Wood's great. I love that movie. But see, Bela Lugosi, he started in the silent movies, right? So he had to learn how to emote and show things without actually speaking. Then you go into Dracula, right?
We've even seen a female actor that was a silent movie star. And she did the same thing.
Same thing. So we go into Dracula, and Dracula is one of the first movies that had sound. It was so early that it was a movie that before they decided that they needed to put music in it. The only music that's actually in Dracula is music that's played in the scene. So there's not a soundtrack to it at all. It is silent through parts that you hear people just walking, and it draws you into it because there's less of a wall between you and the actual events of the movie. There isn't this soundtrack trying to make you feel things. The entire point of that movie is it's making you feel things from the actors doing things or saying things, not through musical cues.
But he's seeing the same thing with animation.
Yes. It's why I love Dracula so much, though.
Sometimes you have to learn the old way.
Yes.
To be today, you can learn so much from the old.
It's why there's some actors that get trained like, hey, show me without words, tell me that you're happy. Tell me that you're excited.
Are you talking the 1931 Dracula?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's no soundtrack to it. It's just dialogue and sound effects from, the scenes. Because they had decided that they didn't want music distracting people. They thought that music would just distract people from the dialogue. Because silent movies were still a very recent thing, right?
And you had music that went over top of the
You had music in the credits, and then it just went away. And then, okay, now it's fine. But it's the same thing in black and white. You have to tell more of a story. You have to show better detail because you don't have color helping you pick everything out. Things need to be more clear. Anyway, Darlene.
In his animation thing that he was saying,
yeah,
that here was no words to these things,
and,
they had to tell the story without words.
Yeah, well, we didn't really see. I mean, there were experiments in sound for years, but we didn't really see synchronized sound until like the jazz singer in like 1927, and then you're talking about Godzilla, or I'm sorry, Dracula, about like in 1931. Um, Yeah, that's another thing that my students have picked, or and I've talked about in class, especially with like using the example of Milei's Trip to the Moon. You see a lot of the characters are just hamming it up for the camera,
Mm-hmm.
and others seem to be like they were coming out of the theater tradition,
Mm-hmm.
so they were able to make the jump. And be clear in their posing and in their actions than a lot of the other characters, the other actors could have. So, and like, again, that's just a major principle in animation is clear posing and body language.
Mm-hmm.
I forget who it was. Whether I think it was I want to say it was one of the Nine Old Men, like Ollie Johnston. But I couldn't I can't tell you for certain. But he there was a quote. It's like you're showing me a character walking. I don't want to see him walking. I want to see what he's thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So it's having that clear, readable pose and body language, explaining what's going on in the character's mind, as opposed to, putting it in a literary standpoint, it's the whole show don't tell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and to tie it back into these Godzilla films, the suit actors actually have to do this. They can't speak with dialogue. They're not communicating through anything other than effectively the way they're moving or how they're
Their
gesturing.
hand is going. Their
and it does come
their
across
head
that
moves,
way.
and they have even further limitations than a human
Mm-hmm.
because that suit just only moves so much.
Yeah, and they don't have facial expressions.
And how I was taking some pretty close looks at the at the kaiju suits in this movie, and I couldn't see any screenings or anything like that, like an actual screen where the actor could see out of. So it's like how detailed did they get in the choreography during these fight sequences where they were like memorizing, okay, got to step here, got to step here, got to step here, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
like a waltz.
Mm-hmm.
Or how well could they actually see where they were at, so they knew that they could hit where they would hit their mark. So
do you recommend the movie, Darlene?
Yes, I love.
You love Anguirus. That's just enough for you.
And this movie actually damages his costume to where it can't open up the arm.
Yeah. So trivia. That is true. That's trivia that we should talk about. Originally, Anguirus' shell was supposed to open up into like wings, but in early scenes filming it, they damaged the suit so much that the shell kept popping up in the middle of and off the suit actor. So they ended up just anchoring it down and never having that happen. But that is a piece of trivia that supposedly Anguirus could like fly or something like that.
Or have some kind of wing-like.
Yeah, that or he could like buff it.
Yeah, or become bigger because the shell comes up. Like sometimes you have those beetles that'll make
with the
bigger
protective shell that comes forward.
Up forward and.
So anyway, we should probably leave it there because I know this review is already over an hour. But any final thoughts? We all loved this movie. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's definitely on your must see list. Even if you only just see it once.
Yeah. And like I said, I feel that it's connected to the first movie. As a kid, I even thought it was just part of the first movie. So take that how you will. So let's leave it there. Chuck, go ahead. Whatever you want to say.
These old kaiju movies, they may seem dated by modern special CGI effects, but the practical special effects in these films were just spectacular, especially for their day, and they paved the roads for the big CGI extravaganzas that we have now. So pay them their due diligence and watch them if you get a chance.
Okay, so thanks, Chuck, for joining us.
Thank you.
I'm Aaron.
I'm Darlene. Good evening.
And keep watching the skies.
At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought.
Thanks for listening to this episode of This Week in Geek. Hungry for more? Check out our website at thisweekingeek.net. You can subscribe to the podcast, browse our Twitter and Instagram, and leave your thoughts on today's topics. If you'd like to give us some feedback, send us an email at feedback@thisweekingeek.net. Tune in next time, and remember,
lower your shields and surrender your listenership.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Thank you for your cooperation. Good night.